be a couple of minutes, folks. They're trying to get a technical issue solved, so apologize for the delay in starting.
You're good? Get up there early. Good, good. Oh, on the phone, yeah.
One thing we're going to need is a clock put up for us. We're going to need a clock put up. It's on. It's on. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the first meeting of the Boston School Committee at the Bruce Bowling Building. We're delighted to be here. Thank you for your patience as we're starting a couple minutes late as we were working out some of the new technical difficulties, and I'm sure we'll find a couple of hitches as we go along this evening. But we're welcome, and we're glad you're here. We'll begin this evening with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So as I said, everybody, welcome. Tonight's meeting is being broadcast live by Boston City TV, Comcast Channel 24, and RCN Channel 13. It will be rebroadcast at a later date. If anyone wishes to sign up for public comment, please see Ms. Mitchell, school committee staff, out in the main hallway at the concierge desk, as they now call it, in the main hallway. Sign up for public comment this evening. Will close at 6:30. We'll begin with approval of minutes of the April 15 school committee meeting. If minutes are approved as presented, hard copies will be made available immediately in the hallway with other handouts. If changes are made, you may access the minutes tomorrow on the BPS website. At this time, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented. Thank you, Mr. Lecanto. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Any discussion or objection to the motion? Any objection to approving the minutes by unanimous consent? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. We'll move on now to the superintendent's report. I present to you our superintendent, Mr. John McDonough.
Good evening, and welcome to the Bruce C. Bowling Municipal Building, the new home of the Boston Public Schools. Tonight, this is a momentous occasion as we host the first Boston School Committee meeting in this spectacular space. Take a moment and look around you. You'll notice that this room is linked to the rich history of the famed Ferdinand Furniture showroom through the preservation of the porthole-style windows. They provide stunning views of the Boston skyline and of Roxbury, our new neighborhood.
When they're not closed.
I think we have one open over there.
Sorry.
We're now closer to our schools, closer to the students and families we serve. This is precisely where we belong. And if you look above you, you'll see a beautiful 80-foot mural painted by a former Jeremiah Burke High School student that brightens this room. What you might not notice, however, is our new state-of-the-art broadcast equipment, which is used to televise these meetings to the public at large. Before I continue, I would like to take a moment to extend my thoughts and prayers to the people of Nepal as they cope with immeasurable grief and try to recover from Saturday's devastating earthquake. And I would also like to reflect for a moment on the events unfolding this week in Baltimore following the tragic death of 25-year-old Freddie Gray while in police custody. With the eyes of the nation focused on these events, we at the Boston Public Schools are once again presented with an opportunity to constructively engage our students in dialogue on the underlying issues of race and culture and the tensions that have existed at times in our nation between communities of color and law enforcement. I've asked today our school leaders to make sure their teachers work with our young people to ensure they learn from these events and channel their thoughts and feelings in constructive ways. The issues in Baltimore featured prominently yesterday in a seminar with BPS leaders, with the mayor's education chief, Ron Dorsey, and his staff, our cabinet, two members of our school committee on critical issues in our critical equity issues in our schools. As part of our collective work and consistent with the recommendations of Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the Opportunity and Equity Reports on Black and Latino Male Achievement, this first session focused on race. It was led by Baltimore native Glenn Singleton, whose key message in the first of many ongoing conversations was courageous leadership on issues of equity begins with courageous conversations on race. We also had the benefit of Mr. Singleton leading a second session in the afternoon with several of our principals and our entire human capital team, academics team, and engagement team. We look forward to our ongoing work in this space. Overall, it's been a busy and exciting week. On Saturday, Mayor Walsh, some of you on the school committee, our local city councilors and elected officials joined me in the ribbon cutting ceremony marking the official grand opening of this building. We opened our doors to several hundred community members and civic leaders who toured our new home, their new home, a place that I explained was designed to inspire collaboration. It was school vacation week for BPS last week. For more than 2,000 of our students, this meant a unique opportunity to explore learning in a different way as part of our Acceleration Academies. Held in 20 of our schools. Did I say 200? I meant 2,000. Held in 20 of our schools, students gained valuable academic support, participated in enrichment activities, and spent time exploring their schools, in creative ways. I'd also like to thank Boston Children's Museum Vice President and our school committee member, Jerry Robinson, for visiting the Nathan Hale School on Monday and reading to our students. It's always a pleasure and a treat for our students to have school committee members visit their schools. And for those of you who may have missed it, I'd like to invite you to stop by the Joseph Lee K-8 school on Talbot Avenue in Dorchester. You probably won't recognize the place, given the efforts of more than 500 volunteers who came out on Saturday to paint, build, and refresh the building and schoolyard. Our thanks to the Comcast Cares program and to City Year for their partnership on this effort. The support has given the Lee School a facelift that's put a smile on the face of all who go there. 18 imaginative kindergartens had their models of a better Boston for children displayed in City Hall last week, showcasing their ideas about how to make Boston a fairer, more interesting place for kids. The Our Boston project, part of the new focus on K-2 curriculum for kindergartners, has been selected to receive the 2015 Excellence in Energy and Environmental Education Awards by the Massachusetts Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs. And I will embarrass him by pointing out that if you saw those displays, you could see part of the skill of Ross Wilson's son, Sam. Speaking of recognition, Boston Arts Academy is being celebrated in a new book co-authored by New York Times best-selling author Sir Ken Robinson, touting the benefits of building curriculum around students' interests. And at Boston Latin Academy, a group of 20 advanced Japanese language students got the chance to practice their skills with a very prestigious guest on Monday. Akie Abe, the wife of the Japanese Prime Minister, visited their class and participated in a lesson on Japanese folklore. Students asked her questions and gave her a t-shirt they made for their Japanese culture club during her hour-and-a-half-long visit. This past Friday, I'm very proud of 30 BPS employees who donned their jeans and gloves and participated here in Dudley Square in the Boston Shines events that occurred across the city this past weekend. And now, I am pleased to announce to you, the school committee, the beginning of a series of appointments that I have now made for principals who will be leading our schools next year. As I call them, I'm going to ask each one of you to come up to the front row and stand with your colleagues. So first, I'm happy to announce the permanent appointment of Patricia Lampron to principal of the William W. Henderson K-12 Innovation Inclusion School. At this first row. As you know, Patricia is the lead principal of the Henderson K-8 this year and has been one of the founding and members and architects of the K-12 Inclusion Innovation Plan. I congratulate Patricia on her appointment. I also want to take this opportunity to express my appreciation and gratitude to both Nadia Ciprian and Isabel DePina for their leadership over this past year as well. Patricia, congratulations. Christine Conley will be the principal at the Henry Grew Elementary School. I believe Christine was actually the first appointment that we asked to come to you some time ago. So Christine is currently the Director of Network Academics for Network E, and she will be the strong leader of our turnaround efforts at the Henry Grew. Rochelle Valdez. Rochelle will be the principal at the Mather School. Rochelle is a graduate of the Boston Public Schools, the O'Brien School of Math and Science. She attended Smith College and earned her degree in government. Rochelle began her teaching career where she taught ESL and served as the LAT facilitator for the Richard Murphy. In this past January of 2014, Rochelle transitioned into the role of Director of Operations at Mildred Avenue School, where she led the development of systems and structures of data inquiry and action planning, behavioral management, recruitment, and selection. She is in the Lynch Leadership Academy, where she started the year as a principal fellow at the Hurley K-8 dual language school, and later transitioned to serve now as interim principal of the Mendel School. Congratulations, Rochelle. Courtney Shapik will now be the permanent principal of the Murphy K-8 school. Courtney is deeply committed to the Boston Public Schools. This past year, Ms. Shepik has been the acting principal of the Murphy and has demonstrated a strong willingness to work with families, strengthen the school site council, and increase communication. She's the mom of 3 and has been an active leader of her children's Boston Public Schools Parent Council. And at the Pauline Shar Elementary, Akasia Osei Bobi. Akasia was born and raised in Syracuse, New York, the youngest of 5 children. She attended Dartmouth, where she earned a degree in psychology with a minor in education and human development. Currently, Akasia is the principal of the P.A. Shar Elementary located in Dorchester. She is the inaugural principal of the P.A. Shar Elementary located in Dorchester. And alongside staff, has worked to establish systems and structures to support teaching and learning. Congratulations, Akasia. At Boston Day and Evening Academy, the headmaster will be Allison Hramick. Allison? Allison has spent the last 15 years redefining what school looks like for Boston's most at-risk high school population. Her tenure at Boston Day and Evening Academy, a competency-based school, began in 2004 as one of the founding science teachers for the day program. She is currently the director of instruction and will be succeeding the phenomenal Beatrice Zapata as headmaster of Boston Day and Evening Academy. And finally, I would like to present to you Kevin McCaskill, who is the new executive director of Madison Park Technical Vocational High School. Kevin, as some of you may have seen or heard in the news, is the new executive director of Madison Park Technical Vocational High. An administrator in the Hartford Public Schools, Kevin previously served as principal of the Roger L. Putnam Vocational High School in Springfield from 2004 to 2010, helping turn around the once underperforming school. I firmly believe Kevin brings passion, vision, and experience needed to turn Madison Park into a model of academic excellence, one where vocational students will leave fully prepared to jump into careers or go on to college. Congratulations, Mr. McCaskill. I forgot one? And before I go to the last, I do want to note that with us sharing the appointment of Mr. McCaskill tonight, somebody we have enormous amount of debt for his service to Madison Park High, our interim headmaster for 2 more months, Albie Holland. Thank you, Albie. And finally, for Snowden International High School, Mr. Eugene Roundtree. Congratulations. Gene Roundtree is currently a principal fellow at the Elliott K-8 Innovation School in the North End as part of the Lynch Leadership Academy at Boston College. He has taken a leave of absence from Madison Park to pursue his Master of Ed in Education Policy and Management from Harvard Graduate School of Education on a James Bryan Conant Fellowship, and spent the following summer planning the Boston Public Schools New Teacher Institute as an Education Pioneer Fellow. He has spent about, I believe, 14 years at Madison Park. 10 years at Madison Park. His experience at Madison, coupled with his participation in the Lynch Leadership Academy, mentored by the unstoppable Tracy Griffith, gives me great confidence and great pleasure in naming him that he will lead the Snowden International High School well. Thank you, Mr. Roundtree. Mr. Chair, that concludes my report. Thank you. Thank you all, and congratulations.
Congratulations and thank you. As much as I love to hear the experience of all the new principals, I particularly love that a couple of graduates at Boston Public Schools, and what a wonderful example that gives to our youth. So thank you for your service, and thank you to all. Before I open it up to members, I do want to acknowledge, for questions to the superintendent, I do want to acknowledge 2 people in the audience. First of all, the woman, even though she is retired from the school committee, we still refer to her as the dean of the school committee, the former vice chair, Ms. Elfrida Harris. Thank you for joining us today after 16 years of service to this committee. It's nice to see you back on a Wednesday night, Ms. Harris. And second of all, the gentleman who worked extremely hard to make not only this room, but this entire building shine and come out as nice as it did, Mr. Tom Leahy is in the back. And thank you, sir, for all the work you did for. You were here morning, noon, and night, and we're delighted now to serve the children of our city in this beautiful building and in this beautiful school. So thank you, in this room, thank you for all your hard work and putting up with us with all of our suggestions and advice. So thank you. I did want to make sure I see you stuck your head in to make sure everything was working right. So we're getting there. I'd now open it up to members for questions for the superintendent. Hearing none, I'm sorry. Ms. Robinson? Ms. Robinson?
Thank you for your report, Mr. Superintendent. Oh,
Yeah, you just want to press the.
Okay, great. Thank you for your report. I do also want to acknowledge
Speak a little closer to the microphone.
what has taken place with the crisis and the tragedies that we've seen in both Nepal and in Baltimore. And my delay this evening was due to the students at my college having a meeting, the Nepalese students, in response to what's taken place. And it's very challenging, and it puts me on pause as an administrator, but also as a school committee member, to be mindful that our students are watching, and they're paying attention to how the adults are responding to such crises and tragedies, both in Baltimore and in Nepal. And so I just wanted to take a moment for us to be mindful that we need to engage in dialogue with our students, with one another, as to how we can best support and respond during this time. So thank you so much for acknowledging, in the midst of what we're doing in Boston, what's taking place, around the country and around the world. Also, I just want to also congratulate the principals, the headmasters, the leaders, and encourage you all as you are setting forth your vision for the next school year to think about how we can set our students up for success, and how, as a school committee, we can help partner with you to set our students up for success. Because at the end of the day, they are our future. They are the reason why we're doing what we're doing and why we're in this work. So thank you for your service. Thank you for saying yes. Don't say no anytime soon, because we have great work ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Dean Coleman? Oh, no comment? Okay. Yes, Dr. Uriarte. I'm sorry, Doctor. The microphone, please. You got it. Press that push button and then pull it down close to you. There we go. See, we can always learn. We're all learning all the time.
I participated yesterday in the afternoon session of Courageous Conversations, and I found it a very impressive and interesting conversation, I think, with the people that were there. But one of the points that was made in that meeting is that without very committed participation from leadership, going all the way down up to the very last person, it would not work. It would not make any difference. It would not make any change. So I was wondering, what are your recommendations of how this body can be involved, how the leadership in the public schools can be involved, so that if there's a commitment to courageous conversation in the district, we make it work?
Thank you, Ms. Uriarte. I believe that in terms of the school committee's role, first of all, I thank both you and Ms. Robinson for being part of those sessions yesterday. I believe that it is the role of the school committee to define what their role is as part of these conversations. I did also hear, as part of the morning conversation, the important role of leadership, both within the school district, at the school level, at the classroom level, and citywide. Mm-hmm. I think we are at a point where we have taken a first step, but it is a first step that has been built on a foundation of work that has occurred over the last year. We reported to you in the past our work of PELP at Harvard last year. where we really began to formulate the district's thinking about our role as leaders of schools, and come to the recognition that race matters. So we as a team now need to reflect on what occurred yesterday and begin to understand, what does that mean? What does it mean as ultimately we know that where it matters most is what happens in every classroom in the city. So how do we take our learning from yesterday? How do we begin to apply it to ourselves in the work we do on a day-to-day basis? How do we begin to build capacity? And then have a critical discussion about how this work rolls out throughout the whole district.
Can I suggest that maybe, in a couple of months, we hear back about the plans of the district in relationship to Courageous Conversation and how this committee can be involved. I'm concerned about having this process sort of bypass us and bypass the leadership, and then it won't matter. It won't matter. So if we're going to do it, I would like us to be involved in a real way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Uriarte. Any other questions or comments for the superintendent on his report? Mr. Locanto?
Am I working?
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for the presentation with all the new principals. Hello and welcome. I just had a quick question, status question on Madison Park. Of course, we're welcoming Mr. McCaskill as the new executive director tonight, but we also have a headmaster search. And to the extent that you have any update on what a timeline might be on that search, I think that would be great for all of us to hear about.
Sure. We've already been in the business of recruiting strong candidates for headmaster. We were hoping to make the appointment of the executive director before we had the actual team in place. And with Mr. Holland's leadership, we have asked the team that has guided significant hiring at Madison Park to come back and reassemble for this one final appointment. I do want to make clear that consistent with the recommendations of the intervention team, all other hires within Madison Park will revert this year back to the normal personnel subcommittee of the School Site Council for selection of people, and that work is ongoing now. So we anticipate accelerating, fast starting, and moving forward deliberately with the selection of the principal, the headmaster for Madison Park. I will say to you, for this position, as well as all other vacancies that are known in this district, all appointments will be made before the end of the school year. We will not go into a school year, at least with those vacancies. At least with those vacancies that we are aware, all appointments will be made before the close of the school year. It's you, Mr. Chair.
No, well, interestingly, they, not sure what the cable office can do about that. They do have one button here where I can actually mute all the speakers at once, but this is also being broadcast, so we have to be mindful of that. It'd be easy to just ask us to speak up, but if we shut it off and speak up, then it can't be heard at home. So did that answer your question, Mr. Locanto? Thanks. Ms. Campbell.
There.
we go.
So, whoa. My question was to kind of an organizational chart around the Madison Park. Does the headmaster work for the executive director, or does the executive director work for the headmaster? Because I don't know of other This is the only school that we have this structure, correct?
Headmaster will report to the executive director.
Okay, and am I correct, is the only high school that has this structure?
Within Boston, yes.
Right, within Boston, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Is there a motion to receive the superintendent's report? Thank you, Dr. Uriarte. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Any objection to the motion? And any objection to approving the motion by unanimous consent? Hearing none, the report is received. And I do want to make special note, the fellow members spoke about our principals. I do want, on behalf of my fellow members, and I know the superintendent did this, but I want to make sure to do this on behalf of the school committee as well, is to give our special thanks to Mr. Holland for his willingness at personal sacrifice to come back and help the districts and the students at Madison Park this year. Your dedication to public service and the students of this district, and particularly this year, the students of Madison Park, is inspiring to all of us, and thank you for what you have done. We are deeply appreciative. So with that, we'll move on now to public comment. Ms. Sullivan?
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. The public comment period is an opportunity for parents and other concerned parties to make brief presentations to the school committee on pertinent school issues. Questions on specific school matters are not answered at this time, but are referred to the superintendent for a later response. Questions on specific policy matters are not answered at this time, but may be the subject of later discussion by the committee. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to speak, and I'll remind you when you have 1 minute remaining and then 30 seconds. Those who require interpretation services will be allotted an additional 2 minutes. Speakers may not reassign their time to others. Written testimony is appreciated and encouraged. Please state your name and affiliation before you begin. TV cameras will only record speakers who face the committee. We have 2 speakers for this portion of the meeting, beginning with Carolyn Kane and John St. Amand.
Good evening, Superintendent McDonough and members of the school committee. My name is Carolyn Kane, and most of you know me primarily as the chair of Boston Sped Pack, but I'm actually here tonight with wearing one of the other hats that I wear in BPS. I am the co-chair or the parent chair of the governing board at the Henderson Inclusion Elementary School, and I want to express the joy and elation of our school community about the appointment of Mrs. Lampron. I received quite a few emails today from parents about this issue. I know that it's one that we've been working on for a long time. I want to thank Mayor Walsh for coming out to meet with our community, for his ongoing support and his assistance, and for his support for not only special education, but for all students in the city of Boston. I want to thank Superintendent McDonough for his leadership on this issue and his support for our community. And I also want to thank Eileen Nash for her ongoing support, assistance, and really coming in to help families with some issues in the last several months. I think that her support for our community cannot be overstated. I think that what we think about at the Henderson community is that we want to do right by all students. It's not just that it's an inclusion school and includes children with disabilities. Clearly, it's nationally known for that issue. We have people that come from all around the country and frankly all around the world to visit the Henderson community and to see particularly its lower school. And as we've expanded into the upper school, we want it to be a beacon for the Boston Public Schools about what inclusion can and should be in the city of Boston. You've heard me talk many times about students with disabilities having the right to be educated with their non-disabled peers, and that truly exists at the Henderson School. We have ongoing work to do, but anybody that's visited the lower school over the last 25 years will tell you that it's very remarkable. What goes on in that school for all students and for all families is incredible. I know that my own child has been there since she was 4 years old, and it's been a family to us. There's progress that my child's made at that school that was completely unpredictable by professionals, and we saw many of those when she was younger. So I think that what we want to say is thank you to all of you for your ongoing support. We know that we're going to need support from the district as we work to expand this school and make it the best inclusion school, not only in the Boston Public Schools, but in the United States and hopefully worldwide. And that we know with the utmost confidence that Mrs. Lampron is the person that's going to take us to the next level. She has not only the education and experience, but the passion and the commitment to all children and to all families to help the children succeed and to help us succeed as a community. So thank you on behalf of the entire Henderson community, and we look forward to working with you in the future to make sure that this is a success for all children. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kane.
Thank you. Our next speaker is John St. Amand.
Good evening. My name is John St. Amand. I'm the Vice Chair of Boston SpedPAC. Our role as an organization is to represent the 11,000 special needs children in the city of Boston and their parents or family. Our main
Excuse me, could you just get a little closer to
Oh,
the
sure.
microphone, please, or get the microphone a little closer to you?
Trying to avoid the feedback, you know.
Thank you.
Our main focus is to educate parents on the proper roles to advocate effectively for their the kids and the needs that they have within the classroom. Tonight, I was very excited to hear the official announcement of Principal Lampron as the new leader of the Henderson K through 12. The Henderson is critically important to the city in its vision of inclusion and the options that the city rolls out going forward. The Henderson has always been has always been that beacon of inclusion, and Principal Lampron is a champion for inclusion, and she's critical to help the Henderson move forward to the next steps and the critical improvements and plans that need to go forward to make that program successful in the middle and high school grades, especially. Last month we had our general meeting, and it was about assistive technology. It was very productive and well-intended, and also the parents really appreciated the presentation. We look forward to working with the district on maximizing assistive technology for students with disabilities going forward. Two areas that need to be that needs special attention, and that were already brought up to the school committee in the past, was a product called Bring Your Own Device, which allows students to bring their own, whether it be tablet, Chromebook, or computer, or tool, and that would be then secured effectively for the school to use. Now, that's already been brought up in past school committee meetings, but we look forward to trying to help maximize that option. The other option that needs to be addressed is that the district needs to come up with a better option for software license purchasing and sharing between schools, across schools, and to students for use both at home and during the summer period of time. The buying power that the district has needs to be maximized for cost savings, but at the school level, but also at the student level, to get more kids to be able to do more with assistive technology. Coming up in May, in May 21st is our last meeting for the year, and during that meeting we also have our executive board elections. So those will be held at the Richard Murphy School in Dorchester, May 21st at 7 p.m. And we'll have several positions that will be open for election. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. St. Amand.
Thank you. We have one last speaker, Palma Koenig.
Good evening. I've testified here before about requesting that policies be made regarding domestic violence in the schools. In BPS, we hear a lot of...
Ma'am, could you just please introduce yourself
My
first?
name is
Thank you.
Palma Koenig. I have a child at I have right now 2 children at the Henderson. One is going to Latin next year, so I'm kind of excited about that. I've testified here before asking that you people consider developing a policy to address domestic violence within the schools. In BPS, we hear a lot about inclusion and welcome, but let's not kid ourselves. If it's trauma, domestic violence, and poverty, it's not inclusion. It may be sympathetic confusion, or victim blaming, or even ridicule, not inclusion. As many of you know, I don't want to be here tonight. This is very difficult. It is personal experience. When I disclosed domestic violence to my child's principal, she told me I was making excuses, shoved a phone at me, and told me to call my abuser and work it out. When I informed them that I had received a 209A abuse prevention order in the courts, she speculated that I must have made something up because he was a nice guy. The principal persistently offered me advice based on her own experience. If I failed to follow it to the letter, she reminded me she was a mandated reporter. I began hearing from others in similar situations about this seedy side of this wonderful school, and it is a wonderful school. Others would tell me they were too afraid to come forward. They were afraid of what would happen. One woman, her child's father, was not a citizen of the United States. He was a citizen of a non-Hague Convention signatory country. She was afraid that if she came forward, that there would be an opportunity for her child's father to take the child and she would never see him again. I was too afraid to come forward too. I still am afraid. But I did, because something had to be done, and my children and I continue to pay the price. I tried to get anyone at Court Street to listen to me. I was stonewalled. I was dismissed. I was even threatened to have the Boston Public Schools attorneys contact me to explain my position.
30 seconds.
Just before she left, I managed to get the ear of Carol Johnson, who advised me to file a complaint with the Office of Equity. I still hesitated until one day I saw the principal visibly shun my 8-year-old daughter. I heard about other situations of other children. Despite having a target on my back, I felt I had no choice but to come forward. After attempts to stonewall me and misdirect me, I was informed, as a parent, I had no standing to complain. I've come here hoping to persuade BPS to adopt a policy to help people like me. To this day, I am afraid to step into my child's school. I have begged to be heard. But tonight, I got to hear Interim Superintendent John McDonough laud this principal. I got to hear applause for this principal and dismiss me and my children again. This is not inclusion. Please come up with a policy to help victims of domestic violence not have this happen to them in the schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Koenig. Did I pronounce it properly?
Close enough.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. New, that concludes our speakers for public comment.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Our first action, Superintendent, did you?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did think it appropriate to comment in a space where we typically do not. I respect the right of every parent to come forward and publicly express their opinion. I do want the committee to know that we have been presented with allegations and that I have had my team fully investigate those. This does have to do with the personnel matter, and I will not speak publicly about personnel matters. I do want to assure the committee that I am fully confident in the appointments that I have made, and I have full confidence that the school will be led extraordinarily well. Thank you.
But having said that, Superintendent, I also want to echo what you said, is we do appreciate parents' willingness to come forward and talk and share and express their viewpoints as well. That is what this committee is here for, to hear that, and it is important that we hear from a wide variety of opinions, so I thank folks for their willingness to do so. Our first action item this evening is a grant for approval in the amount of $90,000. Are there any questions or discussions from the committee on the grant for approval? Yes, Ms. Robinson.
Yes, I see this is year 4 out of a 5-year grant. Is there a place where we can see the details of what's happened in the previous 4 years of this grant?
I think we have is Marianne Creighton here. Marianne.
Good evening. So we do receive quarterly reports from the principals at each of the 5 schools. That was not included in this form
brief.
for you.
It just talks a little bit more about what the money is actually for, but not the actual outcomes.
The outcomes. So the grant really is focused on improving. There are 2 parts to the grant. So the majority of the money goes for neighborhood revitalization and housing rehab. The 5 schools that were funded were actually to look at outcomes for the children who live in this choice neighborhood, both academic outcomes as well as social and emotional outcomes. So the primary way that this grant supports schools is to provide money for programming, both after school and before school programming, as well as tutoring, coaching, and mentoring for the students, as well as social emotional supports. So, for instance, if you look at what's going on at the Frederick School, they have hired a contractor to work with students around tutoring and social emotional support. So there's a program specifically designed for each student at the Frederick School. If you look at the Haynes Early Education Center, for instance, students there are getting more support around technology and the use of technology in learning. So they have purchased iPads and smart boards that are used in their classrooms as teaching tools. At the King School, there are programs that include Generations Inc., for instance, that come in and read to children who need support around reading and other kinds of academic supports. The Winthrop School is using their monies again to provide extra support, academic support for their students, and most schools have identified a cohort of students to work with. So it's a very directed programming, academic support.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the grant? Ms. Robinson?
Is there a way for us to see the outcomes and hear a bit of what's taken place thus far? Is there a report?
There, as I mentioned, each principal submits quarterly reports. It's part of the HUD requirement for the grant.
Send it to us as well?
Yes, we can send those to you. Absolutely.
Excellent.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the grant as presented. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Is there a second? Thank you, Dr. Uriarte. Any discussion or objection to the motion? Any objection to approving the grant by unanimous consent? Hearing none, the grant is approved. Our next action item is the interim salary payment for external funds. This is an annual request that the superintendent presented to the committee at our last meeting. Are there any questions or discussions from the committee on this motion for the interim salary payment for external funds? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve it as presented? Thank you, Mr. Lecanto. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Ms. Sullivan, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Lecanto?
Yes.
Ms. Jerry Robinson?
Yes.
Ms. Regina Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Uriarte?
Yes.
Dr. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Our final action item this evening was presented to us at the last meeting, a name change proposal for building number 4 on the campus of the Madison Park Technical Vocational High School and the John D. O'Brien School of Math and Science. You'll recall at our last meeting, the O'Brien headmaster Nicole Gittins and Madison Park grants manager Fran Smith presented a proposal to rename the building the Nelson Mandela Physical Education Complex. At this time, I'd like to turn things over to the superintendent for any final comments.
I think that you were given a complete report last time. We had testimony from the school site councils of both Madison Park and the John D. O'Brien. I do want to make sure people understand, committee members understand that the vote before you tonight is exclusively for the naming of building number 4 for Nelson Mandela.
And building number 4 houses the gymnasium.
Yes, that's correct.
And it was also referenced at the last meeting a number of times that a video existed. And there's a long version and a short version, and we're going to take a very quick peek, a 3-minute. Is it working up there? It's not. Oh, I think it may be. I see the light on up there. Why don't we try to hit play and see if it actually plays. Okay, it appears not to be working. So I do encourage people to take a look at the YouTube video of Mr. President Mandela in the gymnasium in building number 4 at Madison Park. It is quite moving, particularly his talk about education and focusing on the dropout issue. And so are there any questions or discussions from the committee on this proposal? Hearing none, and I'll entertain a motion to approve the building name request change, building name change request as presented.
So moved.
That's a motion, Ms. Robinson. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Any discussion or objection to the motion? Hearing none, Ms. Sullivan, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Lecanto?
Yes.
Ms. Jerry Robinson?
Yes.
Ms. Regina Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Uriarte?
Yes.
Dr. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. And we look forward to, as discussed last time, that the students get inspired by the words of Mr. Mandela, particularly as he applied them at the school. And we look forward to seeing how you're involving the students and to make his words come alive. So thank you for your work on that. We'll move on to our first report, a proposal to modify middle school.
I'm sorry, Dr. Uriarte had a...
I apologize, yes?
I just wanted to say that I was at that speech with my son, who at that time was 5, 6 years old, and it was an unforgettable experience, and I am just really thankful that you've done this and that we can all remember. Thank you.
Well, now we really wish we saw the video. You would have been able to point out where you were. I have a feeling it's a little bit like, 100,000 people say they were at it. It was such a famous speech. So anyway, thank you, Dr. Uriarte. We'll move on to our first report, a proposal to modify middle school pathways for the Dearborn STEM Academy and the John W. McCormick Middle School. I believe Kim Rice is going to make her way up. I'd like to turn things over to the superintendent, Mr. McDonough.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Rice will brief you on our proposal. I do want to bring to the committee's attention that the context for this recommendation is both to recognize the structure that is embedded within our new home-based student assignment plan, but also to recognize and bring to the school committee's attention that changes occur over time, which have differential impacts on different schools. So the spirit within which we are presenting this proposal to you is to recognize the growth in some schools, evening out capacity in other schools, and making what I believe is alignment of opportunity for our schools to have appropriate feeders. So, Ms. Rice.
Great, thank you. I'm very happy to be technically the first to give a report in this beautiful building. I'm also thankful that I do not have any slides or technology. But I understand that someone might be troubleshooting for the next, for my colleagues who are presenting, so don't mind the distraction. I said that was fine, that they could do that while we're presenting. So really, as Mr. McDonough said, as part of the home-based student assignment plan, the concept of a pathway was established. The idea, it was designed to create predictability and continuity for families in grades kindergarten through grade 8. So as a result, there were relationships that were established for all families, for the elementary schools and middle schools. And that was done through the community process that was led by the EAC, and also based off of geography and capacity. We wanted to mirror and match the number of elementary schools to the number of seats in the middle school. And if you recall, a feeder school does not mean that the student has to go there. What it means is that the student and the family can know that that would be their school, elementary through middle school, should they want that to be the case. They still do have middle school choices, again, based on the home-based assignment plan, but this really allowed for a family to know from kindergarten where the child could potentially go through grade 8, and that would be a guaranteed seat from them going from elementary school through middle school. So based on that model, we had proposed that the McCormick have 5 feeder schools. So that was the Dever, the Condon, the Clapp, the Russell, and the Everett. The Dearborn also had 5 feeder schools. That was the Ellis, the Winthrop, Mason, Perkins, and Tynan. If you recall, this year, the Condon has now gone K-8. So the Condon is no longer a feeder school for the McCormick, which has created a decrease in enrollment in grade 6 at the McCormick. This proposal for you tonight that you'll be voting on at the next meeting, so if you've got additional information and questions that you'd like us to look into for you, we'd be happy to get that for you in the interim, is to both maintain the enrollment or restore the enrollment at the McCormick as a result, and also create and maintain the enrollment at the Dearborn. So what we were proposing is that we would change the feeder pattern. So the Perkins and the Tynan, which currently have a feeder to the Dearborn, would go to the McCormick. That would be a replacement of approximately 3 classrooms at the Condon that now go K-8. That those schools would go to the McCormick, and that we'd create a feeder pattern for the Dudley Neighborhood House Charter School, which doesn't have a feeder pattern yet because it won't have students going into grade 6 until 2017-18. That helps in 2 ways also, given that the Dearborn is in swing space at the Burke School and it's at level 4 status. It gives a couple years as well as that in terms of before 6th graders would then be guaranteed. Again, students can still choose the Dearborn during this period. It's just the amount of schools going forward. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about our proposal. We will be embarking and probably bringing additional information back for folks in the future as we talk about our facilities master plan and grade reconfiguration there. But given what we're seeing at the McCormick this year and the Condon going to K-8, we felt it important to bring to you at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weiss. I'll open up the questions. Ms. Campbell.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Welcome for being the inaugural one. For the facilities master plan, when are we going to see? I don't think we've gotten a timeline yet on that, and yet we're making some pretty big decisions. So my first question is just when will we get a plan for the plan?
So we just proposed an award to the vendor that I believe is under final review. And as soon as we have that, we've got a project manager that actually is on board working with Ron Dorsey and myself, and we'll have a timeline available that we'll be sharing with folks.
Okay, but as part of the RFP, wasn't there a timeline in it?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. So there were 2 phases. The first phase goes concurrently, which is both a facilities index and a kind of educational assessment. So that is a 6-month endeavor. And then there's the actual facilities review, which is 12 months. So the entire proposal is an 18-month process.
It wouldn't start until when?
We were hoping for May 1. We're a little bit off in terms of the contract process, which is why we'd be presenting an updated timeline.
Okay, so 2 years really before there'd be
It's about 2 years.
2 years before it would inform any decisions made by the school committee.
That's correct.
Okay, so given that, and given that in the school quality work group and in the EEC, there was just a clamoring and a begging for more K-8s. Does this mean we're just basically shelving that for 2 years?
I don't know if you want to respond to that.
Ms. Campbell, I think that what it does is Obviously, if there are issues that need to be presented, we will present them. We have intentionally tried to minimize those issues that we present to you off cycle. I think we all had hoped that we would be well into the process by this time this year, and that has not happened. Part of the discussions that occur in phase one is, in fact, that grade structure conversation. So those conversations will play out over the first 6 months of the work. I think what's open for discussion, I don't have the information that will give you clarity on this, but I think that the question that is open for discussion is, as that work proceeds, do we have some directional indicators that allow us to move forward in certain decisions that would impact schools based on where we go with grade restructuring?
May I follow up?
Absolutely.
So I don't think this is just a grade configuration conversation. I think this is an equity conversation, and the research overwhelmingly supports that it is an achievement gap conversation. A couple years ago, I co-hosted with Mary Tamer a public hearing where we had the piles of research presented around the longitudinal studies of students, the difference between going to a K-5 and a K-8, and having that be the only variable. And for low-income African-American students, it was a dramatic difference if you went to a K-5 then to a middle school versus going to a K-8. And it had to do with high school achievement and suspension rates, particularly from Black males. So this conversation about K-8 is not just this idle kind of thing. I think to me, it's a policy issue, and it's something that came out. Parents want it too. Parents want it. The research supports it, and we're moving at a snail's pace. I know this week, it was my understanding from my email, that the Mather parents are holding a meeting to discuss how they could become a K-8 school. Everywhere I go, every picnic, every barbecue, parents are like, I'm really sorry, and I've been at this, I want to say, more than 30 years looking at middle schools in Boston, and we just, nationally, urban middle schools are just not doing it. So I'm just, I'm reopening this conversation because I think it's, I was kind of told, well, we're going to get to it, and we're going to get to it, and we're going to get to it. And 4 years later, it seems to me that the schools with a handful of organized parents, often white and middle class, are succeeding at getting their schools turned into K-8s. I think we got to look at where the K-8s are and what schools have become K-8s, and what about the rest of them.
So I would agree with that, and I think that's the rationale for the larger 10-year facility master plan. Rather than respond to, I'll pick on the Mather because I'm actually going to that meeting tomorrow night, and having a school convert to a K-8 in isolation without then a recognition of the true impact to the other middle schools in the area. That's what we're trying to prevent from this point forward. We're really trying to say we need to take from a 10-year look at what do we want our schools to look like? What are the demographics of our schools? What is the impact of charter schools? How do we think about the relationship and the grades? What about advanced work classes? So there's a lot that is going into this, and absent a larger systemic plan, schools have been working on their own, and we have been establishing varying K-8s. So while I echo the frustration and how long it's taken us to get here, I also echo the concern, which may seem like a hiatus for 2 years before we make a decision on another K-8. I believe that this 18-month process is going to go by faster than we thought it would. That we're at the last hurdle in terms of selecting that vendor and getting the contract process through. So hopefully once we get started, we'll be all guns blazed to be able to have that overall plan, which will then allow for school communities and the community at large to have those discussions about what should our schools look like. Take a review of where our K-8s are now, where are our K-1 schools, what are the impact of K-1 and K-2, which is a big question that has also come up. What about 612s? And there's a lot of questions that we need to be taking a look at, and that facilities master plan will be the place to engage the community and report back to you. So I will make sure that in the very short future, as soon as we get the contract done, that Ron and I get you a timeline and any other milestones that we can make public and available to you as soon as we possibly can.
Just finally, will there be like a website, sort of like with the EAC in the school quality work group, so that the public can participate in this process?
We haven't officially talked about it, but I would assume that is exactly the route that we are going to be going. We want to make the data public all throughout the process and really engage the community.
Okay. And is there an advisory group for this vendor?
Sorry?
Is there an advisory group to this vendor? I mean, what's the charge to the vendor? Because my understanding was it was really about the buildings, but the problem is it's kind of the tail wagging the dog.
It definitely is not about just about the buildings. Obviously, buildings have to be considered so that your programmatic vision can be realized. Absent a consideration of buildings, we will continue to run up against issues that we as a school district and you as a school committee both have been frustrated with in terms of how and when they have been presented. We have been very clear that this does provide a framework for extensive engagement about how we vision schools in the future.
Thank you.
And it is the use of facilities facilitates how you achieve your programmatic vision.
And I will say, Superintendent, that the facilities piece and the planning piece is so inextricably tied to the policies set by this body that it is important that, and are key pieces of how the policy can be implemented and followed through. I think it's important to have the voice of this body represented in that process in some way, and I think that's something we should be talking about. Dr. Uriarte.
I'd like some...
excuse me, Doctor, thank you.
Kim, like Meg goes around and she gets asked about K-8, I get asked about the Dearborn.
Okay.
Okay, so I was wondering, what are some of the decisions that are embedded in here? There's a lot of concern especially in the ELL community about what's going to happen with the programs, ELL programs in the Dearborn. How does this affect? I know that the superintendent had a pending decision, so I just wanted some wrap up of where we are on the issue of the Dearborn and how does this affect some of the other decisions that are on the table?
The specific decision that you talked about was the citing of the SEI programs for Cape Verdean community. I am prepared to make a decision now. I will not announce it now. And I will withhold a final decision until I meet my commitment to members of the Cape Verdean community to have a community meeting with them.
Okay, but how does this affect because they were thinking that they wanted to have their program somewhere else.
Yes. I don't think that impact, so in part, this is an alignment of a feeder pattern.
But
and
you have the Dudley Street neighborhood.
In the Cape Verdean community that ultimately their core desire, which I support, is to have a predictable and seamless and predictable pathway actually from kindergarten through grade 12, where they have assurances that their children will be able to attend, and that they as a community will be embraced, that they as a community will be honored, and that the programmatic supports that are appropriate to students at different levels of language proficiency will be provided, and will be provided in a way that is high in quality and effective for their students. The feeder patterns here is within the construct of the student assignment plan, is really in some part balancing geographically where students are and where the existing middle schools are at this time. So what we have attempted to do in this proposal before you is actually take a look at what has resulted by and perhaps unintended consequence of a different decision by the school committee, namely making the Condon School a K-8, and the impact that that has had that minimizes feeder and then ultimately enrollment at one middle school, and to balance geographically the impact. So regardless of where the feeders are in the Cape Verdean community, that's a programmatic decision in part that is connected with but not determined by individual school.
But in this case, you're connecting the Dudley Street Neighborhood Charter School to the Dearborn.
Dudley Street Horace Mann Charter School.
Understand, but what I'm saying is that creates that link that, the Dudley Street Neighborhood Charter School has a very large proportion of Cape Verdean students.
Yep. And the none of the proposals that have come before me in terms of SEI and Cape Verde has involved the Dudley Street Charter School, Horace Mann Charter School.
So currently, the Perkins and the Tynan are feeders to the Dearborn, of which don't have Cape Verdean programs there. And so the Dudley Street Horace Mann does not have a feeder pattern at all because it is a Horace Mann charter and it hasn't aged up yet. So as we think about relationships, we've actually had a few relationships that have evolved that we may be bringing forth going forward in terms of schools that feel that their K-8 continuity may be a better match than just some of the geographic ones that had been proposed through the community process early on. So I believe going forward, if there are other elementaries or other middle schools, as we think about how best to programmatically think about that continuity, I think that's what Mr. McDonough is saying that we could consider. But sorry.
What level of participation has there been on the part of the Dudley Street Neighborhood Charter School in this process? Do they agree with this? Are they, in agreement with it?
So we've spoken with and met with the Dudley Street Neighborhood, the Perkins, and the Tynan. So all of the schools that would be changing their feeder schools are all in agreement.
Again, my understanding is that the objective or the discussion that is taking place within the Cape Verdean community is that they want to see some kind of integration and not in the Dearborn. So that, I know that a decision has to be made, but this seems to be putting the cart before the horse without any input from that community in any real way.
Thank you.
Ms. Robinson.
Thank you so much for this update. So can you walk me through the conversation you'd have with the parent? You mentioned earlier this process is to increase the level of predictability for families early on. So when a family, is this when families are considering middle school, or are you looking at communicating to families whose children are in elementary school and you're giving them the landscape of what is ahead. Walk me through that conversation of communicating to families what their pathway will look like.
So we've got some members of the EAC committee here that may be better versed to even to update you than I. But the idea really is that a family, when they choose their elementary school, could know where their child would go up through middle school, through grade 8, I should say, not just middle school. And so where there may not be a K-8 in terms of a construct of an option, there may be an elementary to middle school relationship that families would be interested in trying to bridge, similar to the model that had been kind of organically created in Roslindale between the Irving Middle School and the elementary schools that were around that. So that's the idea. As we think about some of the evolution of the home-based plan, the changes and the thinking about the tiers, which you're going to be hearing more about in terms of the school quality index, and allowing for the system based on where you live to not only choose all of the schools within 1 mile straight line of your home, but make sure that you have equitable access to tier 1 schools, tier 2 schools, and tier 3 schools. The schools that you may have on your list shift every time we would potentially change. So there's that little bit of an element in terms of dynamics that could change over time. But the idea is that by not only having families know, it would hopefully also bridge relationships between schools. So it wouldn't just be that it would be a shift from, I know that I'm at the Dever, and so I'm automatically going to the McCormick, that there may be some instructional bridging that would go on across those schools as well.
And how do you help families understand the process of the instruction and the partnerships within the schools? Are there partners for families to connect with who've already gone through the process? I guess I'm just trying to think about how families are best set up well and informed to make these decisions geographically, but then also the best fit for their child as well. So how are the partners set up as far as other parent mentors or other instructional leaders? How does that process take place?
So we're very early on in the process, home-based. We're actually moving into our 2nd year. So right now we use our welcome centers to try and provide as much information as we can, and we're generating a lot of that content as we speak. We then also have school visibility timeline, so generally in November. We encourage families to come out. We do the Visibility Day showcase in our schools. And at that point, we as the schools open their doors, we hope that they then talk about the relationship they have with their feeder schools. In the letters we send out, we also send out information to the families about what their pathway school will be.
So since you're early in the phase, I'll join in on the conversation at a deeper level, but thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Ms.
I
Robinson.
look forward to that.
Ms. Robinson.
Hi.
Can you tell me what percentage of the families this year that are...
Excuse me, Ms. Robinson, could you turn on the microphone in front of you, please? Thank you. When you see that red light, that usually is a, there you go, perfect. On everyone except for yours, Ms. Robinson.
Can you tell me which percentage of the families chose to take advantage of the feeder school this year versus looked at other schools? Because I noticed that most of the elementary schools were tier 3 and level 3, and so is the middle school. That is their feeder. And I was wondering, did people try to opt for tier 2 schools? What percentage might have gotten into those, or do they sort of fall back into the McCormick as a default?
Sure, we can get you that information. We can get it across the board. We actually did a review last year, and now that round 1, we're doing all the analyses now of round 1. We can provide you with the information of just kind of who's choosing feeder schools, who's not choosing, and who's making other choices. And the reason I bring up that second part is the system is really now designed for a family if they do not want to go to a welcome center and have to take a day off to make another choice, they don't have to do anything. And we'll move them on and we'll enroll them in the school of their choice. Or, sorry, we'll enroll them in their feeder school. They can still choose other schools if they've got a different school of choice.
Thank you for bringing that up, Ms. Robinson, because I was actually going to comment as well that I would appreciate a little bit of data around each of these schools.
Sure.
This is, I would expect to see what's the enrollment at each of the schools. And for example, you mentioned in here that the enrollment projection for the McCormick was that it was going to drop.
Correct.
But I'd like to see a little bit more data. If we also have information, because the superintendent has mentioned, trying to increase the likelihood students in the Roxbury community have a pathway to the Dearborn, if we could have a little bit of understanding of each of these schools, I think would be helpful. So some data around this to the full committee would be helpful.
Cool.
You can't make an informed decision without that.
Happy to do that.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. Any other questions or comments from committee members? So we look forward to taking action on this at a future date. Thank you, Ms. Rice.
Great. Thank you.
We'll now move on to our next report, high school redesign. This time, I'd like to invite the Mayor's Chief of Education, Ron Dorsey, and the High School Network Superintendent, Mary Skipper, to please step forward. And I believe I see people looking up and smiling, so it is up there. And it's coming up in front of us too, though. Some of us are going to have difficulty seeing it on that screen. Maybe all of us. I'm sorry? And yes, members have hard copies of the presentation in front of them as well.
While hundreds of thousands thronged the Esplanade, many Roxbury residents waited
you want to
here.
watch it now.
The high school stop was a
It's
chance
available.
for the community of color to welcome a hero.
So I just want to start real quickly with a message from the mayor. Sorry about that. All right. We may have to get this going in a minute. Sorry about the technical difficulties. We will. What'd you say? Oh, sorry, we just heard that the internet's down, so we won't be streaming it. We will go to the slide presentation. So first of all, thank you for the opportunity to present on what we think will be a very exciting opportunity for Boston. I do want to say it's a great privilege to be in this space. I enjoy this space in the elbow room. It's going to be a lot harder for Kim Janey to throw things at me at this distance. So.
No, it won't. Got a good right arm.
So you may recall that in the mayor's 2015 State of the City address, one of the things that he talked about was wanting to make sure that Boston could guarantee a quality, relevant, and modern education for all students in Boston, especially our secondary students who are on their way to success in post-secondary settings, career, and life. And so responding to the mayor's charge, BPS and the city are partnering with the Opportunity Agenda and the Center for Collaborative Education to launch a citywide design process to develop a new vision for high school learning and post-secondary and career preparation. Over the course of the presentation that we'll go through tonight, we'll give you more context for this effort, let you know why we're doing this and why it's an opportune time to do this. We'll describe the work that we've done to date, and we'll also do with community members going forward. We'll describe a very unique set of tools that we'll be using, and unfortunately, if the internet remains down, we can't show you one of the primary tools that we'll be using, but I think that we have designed an unprecedented, broad, and deep engagement process with the public that should put the public and BPS stakeholders in the lead of this design conversation. And so I will turn it over to Mary Skipper first to give us the context and grounding, and then we'll talk about the process going forward.
So there's a lot of different data that we could share, but I think the important thing is to remember that we have made some real progress in the high schools, particularly over the last 7 to 8 year period. Our graduation rates are the highest that they've ever been. This past year was almost 67%. And what's important is that it's been a steady increase every single year for the last 7 years. In terms of our dropout rate, it's been the lowest ever for the last 2 years. In fact, record low. When you look at urban districts across the country, you won't find many that have lower. We're right now, we cracked the 4%, which is amazing. And there's been through a lot of hard work of a lot of our team to do that. The good news is that these kinds of pieces of data extend across all of the subgroups. So, whether it's Black and Latino students, whether it's special education students, whether it's English language learners, we've seen these increases in graduation rates at 9 and 10 points for our Black and Latino students. And for the dropout rate, it's been across all of those groups as well. So it's really a broad process that's taken place that's allowed us to make sure that every student has seen an increase in graduation and a decrease in dropout. And that's also extended to the academic piece. So when you look at the achievement gap, which concerns us all, you'll see that for the last 7 years, we've made very steady increase. For instance, on our 10th grade English MCAS, our ELL students have seen since 2007 a 27-point gain. And our special education students have seen a 31-point gain. So these are good stats. They're going in the right direction. But we know there's a lot of work to do. We know there's a lot of holes, and we know that the system is still, even with a graduation rate approaching 67%, it's still 20 points lower than the state average. And that's not acceptable. And that's something that has to create a sense of urgency in us to do better. We also know that we have persistent achievement gaps that still exist for our Black and Latino students, particularly our boys, for our special needs students, and for our English language learners. And we also know that those gaps exist when it comes to our students having access to college and persistence through college. So really, this is the fuel, this is the urgency that we need to turn our attention to. And so this is what's behind the high school redesign effort.
This effort is being conducted in 3 phases, and so the first phase of this effort was purely a public engagement design process. We wanted to bring together, and if I can flip to the previous slide, you will notice a number of logos at the bottom of the slide. We pulled in multiple partners and multiple people from those partner organizations simply to ask them, how do we have a public conversation about this, and what is the toolbox that we build to spark the public's imagination and really get people excited about designing. I want to be clear that in this first phase that took place from March through April of this past year, that we made no decisions about what the future of high school will be, what learning will be, what models will be implemented, or policy changes. It was simply a design process to figure out how to best have the conversation. We're now entering phase 2, which is the public engagement phase, which will run from now until about July, and there are aspects that will extend beyond that. What we will do over this phase is not only hold some public meetings ourselves, which will be very interactive design meetings, but the design kit that we've put together is really intended to put the tools, the knowledge, and the protocol in the hands of a number of partners and a number of stakeholders to hold their own conversations. And we've created mechanisms for you to feed information back to us and join with us in synthesizing and prioritizing the vision elements for the high school of the future that come together. One thing that I want to note is that in addition to these meetings, you'll be able to provide input through social media outlets. There will be an online blog. There will be many different ways to interact with us face-to-face, so that it's not just online interaction. And this summer, we will be announcing a high school redesign competition for which there will be 3 prize cash awards of significant amounts. One of the criteria for this design competition, which will extend into the fall, is that you have to have teacher and student representatives on your design teams. And so we're really looking forward to that implementation. This will lead to a planning phase, and I want to make the distinction between design and planning so that we don't confuse the two. Design is really about ideating, putting the ideas on the table that should then give us a set of choices that we can make about how to best configure those ideas and give ourselves a blueprint or a roadmap to the decisions that we want to make about policy, practice, and systems changes. One of the things that we will have to keep reminding ourselves of and the public is that we are in the design phase and we are in a phase where we are creating ideas. There will be a next very inclusive, very public phase to actually plan what we do in the way of change. It says here that tentatively it's 2016 and 2017. If we're doing our work right, it's dynamic and it's something that continues to move forward and will not just be limited to that timeline. The goal here is really to figure out how do we equip all students with the knowledge, the skills, and the experience that they need coming out of high school to thrive and succeed in post-secondary settings, in career, and in life. And so on this slide, you'll see some of the things that we're hearing from workplaces and our colleges and universities are necessary skills and really multimodal literacies that young people have to have and that they expect them to have if they are to succeed in their settings. Digital literacy, inventive thinking, effective communication, collaboration, and teamwork. You can read them for yourselves. One thing that is missing here, but that we talked a lot about, is cultural proficiency as well. We want all of our students to come out ready to thrive in a world where difference and uniqueness should be an asset in community building. If we are not helping our students build that kind of cultural proficiency, we are not readying them for a very dynamic and exciting world.
So what we've listed in from that phase one with that initial group, we met with them in 4 sessions. And from that, we did a series of exercises, and we can bucket sort of what we talked about. And that is that in terms of the designing, we're looking at learning, we're looking at school culture, and we're looking at real-world connections. So the types of things we talked about in learning is that it has to be surrounded by high expectation but high support. So the idea of Common Core, the idea of tiered interventions have to be at the root of it. We talked about learning being beyond school, recognizing that our children are out there in school 6.5 hours a day and that they learn the rest of that day. And so how can we construct learning opportunities for them? And that it should really be 24/7 and not limited to a BPS building. And so some of those ideas from a learning perspective got people very, very excited to think that this is what we talk about when we say 21st century learning. The school culture piece, we can't emphasize enough that it's got to be personal and individualized because none of our children are the same. We talked a lot about whole child and the need to really look at the social, emotional, and the health and physical well-being of our kids. The close collaboration among the adults, that this is also about adult development, and whether it's teachers or staff or social workers, that they play a pivotal role, and that the parent and the community engagement is also part of that structure. And then in terms of the real world connections, we talked about things like service learning opportunities, community service, internships, and real world applied learning, so that students have to show and demonstrate what they know and they can do. And that would take a multiple pathways approach.
We talked briefly about the toolkit that we've put together, and in the absence of having the internet available to us, I would ask that as soon as you can, please visit highschoolredesign-boston.org. This is the website that we've set up really to create a set of easy tools and easy steps for you to follow to learn about what we're doing, to spark your imagination. We're giving you some examples there of things that are going on around the country and around the world where others are really taking on the challenge of creating more modern and relevant learning for their students. We also give you an easy set of options for you to participate and give feedback, as well as a protocol for you to use to have your own conversation and feed that information back to us. Over time, what you will see on the website is an aggregation of these ideas. You will be able to see what others around the city are talking about, be able to comment on it, upload your own comments and help us prioritize in that way and help us have a dynamic conversation so as we go from online to face, we can talk about the conversation that is evolving and how the priorities may be evolving. So I would really encourage you to look at the website, give us feedback. We've gotten good feedback because we've now shown it to, we had about 25 organizations with us yesterday, because if you want to crowdsource information, one of the first rules of crowdsourcing is don't put the ask out there and just expect people to come. Make sure that you already have a small army ready to jump into the process. So 25 organizations at the very least are ready to hold conversations on our behalf with the people who trust them and with their stakeholders. One of the things that we ask of everybody in the city, folks in this room as well, if you're compelled, have a conversation with the people that you're closest connected to and ask, what should the high school of the future look like? And we'll talk a little bit about the design questions that we want you to explore.
Mr. Dorsey, as you're flipping the page, I just want to say that site again was highschoolredesign.boston.org.
highschoolredesign-boston.org, and we'll put the site up on the screen at the end of the presentation.
So really in phase two, as Ron was saying, the 25 stakeholders in this next circle really represent all the different community stakeholders that we know need to come to the table to go out, hold forums, and continue to be able to get ideas from their different constituents. So as you can see, we range from higher ed and government officials to parents, to students, to teachers, to leaders. And really we grounded the conversation around two key things. What do we expect the future high school students to know and be able to do very concretely? And then in order for that to happen, and if those are the priorities, what are the important characteristics that the future high school needs to have?
The information and design ideas that we generate from this process will immediately feed two very important processes for Boston Public Schools. One is Superintendent Chang's strategy and execution plan development. He is actually, we've probably had 6 meetings now. He's been a part of 2 of them. Our very second meeting, he sat with all of our stakeholders and participated in the process design process. And yesterday for our orientation and design discussion with our 25 partner stakeholders, he and members of his transition team participated in that. Great feedback from them. He is interested in making sure that he brings these design tools to his own transition process and that we can amplify this process through his work. This will also inform the facilities master planning process. So to go back to some of the conversation that was held, the first conversation in the facilities master planning process is really about what the education program is. What does progressive, modern, and relevant learning look like in Boston, and how can we forecast that? The buildings conversation comes into it when we then ask, what's the infrastructure that we have to build to support that vision for education? And so this is one part of that conversation about what the education program should look like, the high school redesign process. We were privileged yesterday to have the vendor who will be doing the master planning process in our training session with us. And again, they said, all right, we need to start using the toolbox that you're building. We're already thinking about how to dovetail with this conversation and to pick up from where you will be leading. This will also feed into phase 3 when we get into a more dedicated planning process and have to make choices with community members and our stakeholders about policy, practice, and systems changes. Lastly, we are going to start with 4 meetings beginning next week. We're going to cover a little bit of geography, but these are initial meetings. So May 4th at the Presentation School in Brighton, May 11th here at the Bowling Building, May 20th, East Boston High School, and May 21st at the Boston Foundation. You will notice that all of these meetings are from 4 to 6, and we've gotten pushback on that immediately. One of the reasons that we did this is because we wanted to optimize student participation in this as well. But when you consider what I said about giving the toolkit away to the public, these 4 meetings will quickly expand to 40 meetings over the next couple of months. And we've asked our partners to let us know which of those conversations are public conversations so that we can invite others to the conversations that they will be holding. We ask folks in this room the same. If you go on our website and you want to register a conversation that you'll be holding, let us know if it's a public conversation, and we want as many people who want to participate. From a translation standpoint, we've translated most of the protocols into about 5 languages right now, and we'll proceed to do that. But part of our strategy has also been bringing organizations into the room who are trusted in their own communities to hold the conversation. So we expect that there will be Spanish-only meetings, there will be Mandarin-only meetings, Cape Verdean Creole, Haitian Creole only meetings. We think that this is going to be the best way to get the deepest engagement and to hear from people who wouldn't otherwise participate in some of these processes. This is going to be rich, but I can tell you, May 4th, 11th, 20th, and 21st, I can almost predict who's going to be in the room. And it's going to be lively and it's going to be a lot of fun. But we don't just want the folks that we know will come. We want to make sure that people are having conversations with the people that they trust in the community and that they're going to enjoy doing this design work with. And so I will just leave on the screen our website address, and we'd be happy to meet with folks, provide orientations, because we'll be doing a combination of hosting the events that I just showed you, but also going out to organizations and making sure that they're prepared to host. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey and Ms. Skipper. Open it up to questions from Ms. Campbell. Okay. Dr. Uriarte?
Want to go first?
I will jump in if you don't.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
All right.
Ms. Campbell,
okay.
why don't you
Yes,
start
sorry.
off?
Sorry. Okay. Well, I don't want to always go first. Thank you. This is an exciting process. And I haven't had a chance to dig into the website yet, so my questions were probably answered there, and I apologize. But a few points. I think we might want to think about it in terms of a new vision for adolescent education, and just let go of that term, high school, because it already puts us in a box that I think we're trying to get out of. We're trying to get out of the grades. We're trying to we want to think holistically about adolescent education. So I think we want to think about a team that might come together and partner with Ben Franklin Institute, for instance, in serving students who are 16, 17 years old at Franklin. It's not even a high school. It's something else. So I just want to applaud that we're doing this, but push us to really not just go through the same process that, for me, is now the third time the city's gone through this, and the nation's gone through this high school redesign. I think now, let's really blow it out. My three points. One is I think it's really important that the design teams are anchored in research, that this is evidence-based. Fabulous new study released today. Well, I got the notice today, the Stanford study on urban high schools and the role that social justice and conversations around race and class determine academic achievement and outcome. We in the trenches know this, but it's not widely known. So I think getting the design teams to, in terms of the competition, to weigh that they are research-based. Second, that I don't see anything in here about the content standards, and I totally believe in all these other things, but if we don't have really strong, for example, math and science content and history, and so if we don't have the content, then I think we're selling the kids a bill of goods, and it's a feel good without a substance, and I worry about that very much. And finally, I appreciate having teachers and students on the design teams. I hope it's not limited to existing constellations, so it could be some new configuration of people who come together and, want to put some adolescent education that's year-round at the, aquarium or something that's, it's completely out of the box of what we've been doing. So I think it's fantastic. Let's just not hold back.
So, I think your point about the not boxing into the grades is right on. We've actually been saying secondary because we don't necessarily know what that looks like in terms of the grades. I also think that your point about the academic component will come out in phase 2. So again, with phase 1 being really the focus of process of how to get all of the ideas, phase 2 is really about putting some meat on the bone. So that's that piece about the rigor and Common Core and et cetera. And then your other point about the evidence-based or research-based, that certainly will be one of the guiding principles, but we also want to open it up for things that haven't been studied yet, because there's certainly some good ideas out there in terms of innovation that there's no proof yet for, but we have tangential information for. So that will go into the high school design as for the competition as one of the things we suggest. But we also are really trying to be a little provocative and get people thinking of things that don't even exist yet.
One quick comment about the resources that we provide. There are two places on the website. One is called Spark Your Imagination. The other is called Additional Resources. Spark Your Imagination, we provide reports, articles, and a couple of film clips about examples of things that perhaps look like the high school of the future. Additional resources include a number of the research reports, including MBAE and some other pieces that we're encouraging people to make sure they take a look at. We're also encouraging people, particularly in the additional resources space, to upload resources that we should all be looking at.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Dr. Uriarte.
This week at UMass Boston, we had a discussion about education. A lot of African American, Latino students in the room, and it wound up being a discussion of high schools. And so I would really, my question is really, what's your timeline? Because I think that it would be, UMass Boston has a lot of students from BPS, and so that it would be a really good place to have a discussion with students that have gone through the high schools and can look back. So I was wondering what, school's winding down now, so it's not a good time, but how long will you be working on this so that maybe we can organize something at UMass?
So we thought about an initial timeline of between now and July 1st, or maybe the end of July. But as we thought about it more and have gotten more feedback from folks, I think we're going to have to be flexible. We don't want to turn the spigot off on some of the conversations too early. The design competition will take us further into the fall, where we will be able to build on the knowledge and ideas that we have and to start to focus them through that. So I think that this phase of creating ideas, synthesizing the ideas, and giving them some sequence will run through probably early fall.
Early fall. Okay, so
Yep.
then let's, I'll get in touch. I have one more question. I was wondering what, you say that there's a place, I tried to look at the website, I couldn't get on.
I guess we all don't have the internet.
No, I mean, well, yeah, I was wondering whether you could talk a little bit about what you found most compelling about the new, sort of like the vision. What have you found to be compelling ideas of what high schools could be?
So, I will offer a couple. So in our Spark Your Imagination toolbox, there's an article about Finland's work on creating integrated coursework. And so where they're breaking down the discipline silos and really integrating core subjects in a way that make them more relevant, but really ask students to do complex, integrated, and critical thinking in some ways. We found that compelling. Also included in there is a film about a program called PenSol. Some folks in Boston know PenSol. It was started by a friend of mine, Dwayne Edwards, who was the Jordan brand design director for about 10 years. Dwayne knew at 14 that he wanted to be a shoe designer, but there was no pathway to shoe design. So he spent 10 years more than 10 years in the industry as an executive and one of the leading executives to then come out and start a school. His goal was to make sure that no student who wanted to be in the industry had to make up the pathway again. So now he's created the pathway. And what's interesting about it is he's compressed a lot of skill building, what you get in post-secondary, also real-world learning into a 14-week process by which students between the ages of 18 and 30 at the end of the process are either headed to a college level or graduate design program, or they're headed straight into design studios. His staff are the executives of Converse, Reebok, Nike. It's the people who actually do the work, and you have direct exposure to teachers while they're not certified in the traditional way. They know their craft and they know what it is to thrive in their environments, and they know how to teach it to young people. Mm-hmm. It's not just the design process, but it's also teaching the practical life skills that will help them thrive in a collaborative setting and in a setting that asks you to do a lot of multimodal tasking.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Uriarte. Mr. Lecanto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Skipper, Mr. Dorsey. One initial question I had was, who's been involved to date in that phase 1 design, process design, and who also will be leading some of these conversations that we have upcoming in May?
So if you look at the the bottom logos, these are many of the members, representatives that were part of that phase one. And so we really tried to branch out and get a representative group of stakeholders to inform that phase one process. For the May forums, Ron and I are, but the hope is that the folks from the phase one and also the group that we just met with, which collectively comes to about 50 individuals representing all of those organizations and constituents, will be holding their own forums. And so therefore, exponentially, we are going to get so much feedback from all those different representatives.
Just to give you a flavor for who was in the room yesterday, the BTU was in the room yesterday, BSAC, the Mayor's Youth Council, Sociedad Latina, Bison, Build, I'm going to miss some folks, but Edvestors as well. So many different types of organizations, but we will still reach out further because it's also, individuals can do this. This is about people's social networks as well.
Right, right. And it sounds like, you know, you're sort of breaking down barriers, so to speak, between the conversations that the district or the city would be holding on those 4 dates and the ones that, you know, we're essentially empowering our partners to hold to further this conversation.
Yes.
Yeah. So the other question that I have is, you know, this one of the thoughts that occurred to me in this process, and also in thinking about the parallel, or maybe the process that follows for the facilities master plan, is ancillary ideas, things like start times, for instance. You know, where do those fit in? You know, do they fit in here? Do they fit in later down the road when you talk about the facilities master plan, or is it something where, you know, we're taking all comers? You know, we want people to come with whatever idea they think works here and insert it so that it gets built into the process going forward.
So I mean, I think when we get into that planning phase, that's where really we're looking at the design piece and then saying what needs to happen reasonably to be able to impact that planning piece. So start times would certainly be one. Seat time would certainly be one. Or how we measure the time and the space of learning. Grades, competency. That would be another conversation. So these are some of the exciting things that, you know, when we talk about, you know, to Meg's point of blowing it out, really putting everything on the table to say, for our young people, what do we know from evidence works, but also from our observation as educators we know works. And then looking at what inhibits that from happening. And sometimes it's policy, sometimes it's good policy with unintended consequence, sometimes it's bad policy. And so it's really kind of putting all of that on the table to say, what do we owe our young people and what are we capable of doing in the BPS?
I will just add that what we want to do is encourage the public to be as generative as possible. Some of what the public will come up with will be planning ideas as well. Give it to us. I think it's going to be on us to manage and bucket information in the right way. Start times came up yesterday in our conversation. What assessment will look like in the high school of the future has already come up in the conversation. How we define and what the role of the teacher is has come up in our conversation, in several of our conversations already. And so we're going to need to figure out how to represent it and synthesize it in the right way. One, to get a clear picture of the design, but secondly, to order it in a way that we can make choices.
Yep. I think, you know, trying to synthesize the conversations we've had about pathways tonight, along with this conversation and thinking about the role that people can play. I mean, what we're all talking about is the notion of having faith in the system and, you know, placing your trust in the system, putting your kid into an assured pathway over an extended period of time, or a number of you children over an extended period of time. And so, you know, people that have these concerns about, I don't know if I can place my trust in the high schools. I don't know what my options will be when I get to grade 6 or grade 9 or even grade 3. If we, you know, think about some of those different sticking points that we heard about in the C.C. Annenberg reports. I think this is an opportune time, even though this specific conversation is focused on high schools. We'll have this opportunity. We'll have the facilities master plan. People need to make their voices heard in order to have the school system that they want for their children and for this city.
The other set of information that I think we'll have to bucket and figure out what to do with are the questions that arise about elementary and middle. probably in our very first conversation, a few people said, all right, if we're going to start thinking about these principles as the design for high school, what does middle school, what does elementary school need to be in order for students to show up prepared for this kind of learning experience?
Absolutely.
So there are going to be some forcing functions there as well. And this is maybe a backwards mapping way of doing this, but we're going to have to do this in some dynamic ways that we don't set a huge step up because we've done a great job with high school design and implementation, but we've ignored the rest of the pipeline.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lecanto. Ms. Robinson.
Yes. Thank you for mentioning middle and elementary school, because that was my question. Given that these kids will be hopefully looking forward to high school, how can we capture their voices now? We have this wonderful example of what the kindergarten children have already told the city about what could make it a better place. So we know these kids also have ideas. Will there be a way that their voices can add to this conversation?
I mean, absolutely. The toolbox is kind of oriented to it. I think we need to find the partners who can best help us have the conversation with younger students, middle school grade students. It shouldn't be a problem. They're all smarter than I am. As are our elementary school students, which you saw at City Hall today. So I think we just have to figure out how to organize those conversations.
Great. I have another question because I'm trying to understand the data. We have 67% of our kids graduating from high school and 4% dropping out. So what about the 33% that don't graduate? What happens to them?
So the 4% is an annual. So in some cases, it may take a student longer to graduate high school, and those are 4-year graduation rates. Okay. Some of our kids take 5 years, some 6 years, some leave and then come back. Mm-hmm. So the graduation rate measures for the cohort that started how many finished in the 4 years, whereas the dropout is for every student that was registered, how many of them dropped out in a given annual year.
At what point do we begin to see where kids are beginning to have trouble, that you would begin to think that somebody's going to drop out?
So, I mean, this is actually really close to my heart. I mean, you can see the academic pattern of a child as low as 5th or 6th grade to really start to see the footprint. We've actually, at the high school level, pushed back into the 8th grade, which isn't even early enough. But we're actually doing more intervention at the 8th grade. We're moving failure is not an option backward into the middles, but we're also, for our summer school piece, going back to the 7th and 8th grade. And, you know, one of the things we started talking about is looking at sort of transcripts and how kids are doing in courses and really using multiple indicators besides, like, we have our own, data warehouse where we have a risk analysis report to look at, but really working with the schools for them to understand what does that mean. And then what are the interventions that we need to design at the different levels for the students to do something for them. So this is, I think, the beginning of a really important conversation that will go all the way back. And I think the high school redesign competition itself, I think the middle schools will get really jazzed about it. I think the middle school kids as teams would love doing something like that, with their school leader or with their teachers and their community partners. So I think we'll be able to evoke, their voice in that conversation as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Ms. Robinson.
Thank you so much for this presentation. The change and innovation that's going to emerge from this process is already exciting. I can sense that the conversations you've been having internally and now engaging the public is really going to spark, as you said, spark the imagination in a great way. I wanted to just echo some of the comments from my committee members of the type of voices, the non-traditional voices, the non-traditional students, as early as possible. As much as possible, the non-traditional, the parents who are students. I think about the adult learner. I'm always in that space because those parents are getting their education at that time because somehow it was delayed or denied. So as they turn back the clock, what would they have wanted to do differently? And as you engage higher ed, don't forget about the higher ed institutions that serve non-traditional students, the students who are starting earlier, as you mentioned. So one of your partners is Benjamin Franklin.
Yes.
Which is excellent that they're here. I'd love to add Cambridge College to that partnership as well, because you want as many different voices to the table, to the experience where their trajectory has been disrupted or shifted. It can still bring a very rich perspective to this partnership and the input that's needed. The other So this is just a question or a comment. You're probably on top of this because when Mr. Dorsey is in the house, he's on top of things. With the picture of what the future high school graduate to know and be able to do, are you connecting this to the strategic plan and the vision we've already set, the vision of the high school graduate, and you're just connecting those
Definitely.
dots, and then
Definitely.
you're asking the public to add to that piece?
Definitely.
Okay. Okay. I just wanted to make sure we're not, reinventing anything when there was already a long process with that piece as well. So those are my two comments. I'm excited to see how the committee is going to be able to partner as well as hear the reports as we move forward. Thank you.
One quick comment. One of the discussions that I'm looking forward to, I was with the Opportunity Youth Collaborative today, and this is a collaborative of the PIC and a number of organizations who are doing work around dropout recovery and supporting young people to get reconnected to education and career options. They, on March 20th, are going to hold their high school redesign conversation with young people who have become disconnected from school and career systems. I think that one is going to be particularly insightful, and I'm looking forward to it.
Would that be May 20th?
May 20th, yep.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to echo, I'm not going to belabor it. I was going to make the point, and Ms. Robbins suggested as well, that this committee did an awful lot of work around strategic planning and the vision of a graduate that had actually been, done as well before. So the tying the two together is extremely important to us. So I thank Ms. Robinson for bringing that up, and for Mr. Dorsey and Ms. Skipper for recognizing that as well. So thank you for your presentation tonight, and we believe this is going to be an ongoing series of presentations on this.
Yes.
We look forward to working with you very closely on that and having the involvement of a number of committee members in the process.
Thank you.
So thank you. We'll move on now to public comments on report. Ms. Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. We have no speakers for public comment on reports.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Any new business from members? I just want to apologize for any viewers at home. I have received several notes that they had difficulty broadcasting this evening, both with the audio as well as the streaming. And so it's working the bugs out in a brand new building, and it will take a little bit of time, but I have no doubt the cable office will get that corrected. So thank you for everybody at home with their patience on this. And our next meeting, that concludes our business for this evening. Our next school committee meeting will take place on May 13th at 6 p.m. right here in the Bruce Bowling Building. Is there a motion to adjourn? And it looks like we are unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. Have a good night.
You can see when it comes on.
Yeah, and also what I have is the ability here. Personally, I don't have the ability to set that.
Because that's an old one. Yeah, that's what it looks like from here. So if they have it.
So do you get to walk to work now?
Ask her her morning commute.
I have to go get my.
Thank you for the chocolate.
School Street.
What? Oh, come on.
The student didn't even call?
I hear you. Nothing wrong with being a creature of habit.
And the line is not long or around the corner at Dunkin' Donuts.
Thank you for the chocolate.
That was Miss.
Thank you so much.
Oh yeah, do I need to do a water run?
No, I'm taking care of it.
All right.
TCB.
Now that I can park
Thank you.
downstairs, we can just pull
know.
it on up, you know?
Yep, I know.
So we can bring little things to our cubicle space?
Yes, absolutely.
What do you want?
No, if we want to bring any personal items.